Hello, Feisty people. Welcome to your favorite podcast where we talk about your favorite sports with your feistiest friends. Kelly, what sports did you play this weekend?
What sports did I play? Yeah. Interesting. My brother-in-law and sister are here, and he's a big cyclist. So I told him I was going to take him on all these bike routes, except I'm not actually fit enough. So I kept like taking him and leaving him. That's what I did. I'd be like, okay, now good luck.
Oh, you're like,
make your way home.
Ride him to the bottom of the climb and then wave to him kind of situation.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay, I like that. It's good. You still got out on your bike? So
I got out on my bike. I left him. I was like, it's very well marked because we were doing the century. And somehow, Sarah, he ended up doing the loop twice. He did like 20 extra miles.
Oh, wow.
Like, you know when someone doesn't realize that they started another lap?
Amazing.
Yeah. So, what did you do? Sports? Did you sports?
I did some sports. Okay, I went to CrossFit this weekend, which I normally do, but right now I'm in Calgary. I'm not like in Victoria at home. So I went to like a different CrossFit than I normally go to. And we did, okay, get this. If there's one thing that's going to be, that you're going to do in CrossFit that's going to be what an ex-triathlete could be good at, right?
Okay.
What
I'm
would
thinking
it be?
now.
Okay, how about
box jumps, run, row, run.
Run, row, run. I wonder where you got that from. Okay, what it actually was like a set of this was at the beginning and end, but anyway, they work out. It was quite a long workout. It took me 25 minutes, and at the end, there was 20 heavy back squats followed by a 1 mile run.
Nice.
And I was like, yes. And my legs even did that wobbly thing, you know, like the first time you try to run off the bike. That's a very triathlete. It's
a very niche reference there.
Experience.
Yeah.
Yes. But like,
our audience is all like, oh yes, obviously,
you know, but your legs kind of wobble, and I obviously haven't felt that in a really long time. And I just like did these heavy for me back squats, and then like tried to run out the door, and my legs went, whoa.
Nice.
So there you go. It was very fun.
So you CrossFit was at the CrossFit gym. Does everyone watch the CrossFit Games? Like, were they all like talking about it? Are they into it over the weekend?
Because I was at a different thing. Like the conversations I had were more like, welcome, thanks for being here, good job on the workout. So, but yes, at home, like there's a certain group that are like super into CrossFit, and they will talk about it.
And I know you're not super into it, as you established. You're like no, I'm still cool. I'm chill about it. Cool. But you did watch the games.
I did. So what I watched, it was great. I love I love that it's on YouTube, and if you watch it like a little bit delayed, you can like fast forward through stuff or like see. So I didn't watch like all the heats of all the things because there was 10 events, and then there's 3 heats in each event for the most part. But I did watch like the final heat of every event. So
here's my question. So Tia-Clair Toomey won her 8th title. She is crazy in a good way. And I watched some of her. The first event, which we talked about last week, was this like run, row, run. Yeah. And she beat like more than half the men's field. And it was like a 4-mile run, like a 3,000 meter row, and like a 2-mile run. So I was trying to figure out, because they give you the total time, and she did the total thing in 49 minutes.
Yes.
So that was 6 miles of running and 3,000 meters of rowing in 49 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is pretty fast. So then I was trying to figure out how fast she was running because I wanted to know. But they don't really like break it down.
Oh, yeah. You'd have to go in and do math. I don't know. I think that there were a lot of athletes running around like 6-minute miles. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You'd have to go in and do them. Okay. But honestly, in this event, I'm like a little bit in love with Tia-Clair Toomey now. I have to tell you. But I had so many thoughts because, okay, first of all, this is the first time in CrossFit I've ever seen, doesn't mean it's the first time it's ever happened, but it's the first time I've ever seen them start everyone together, like the men and the women started together. And guess what they forgot to do from a media perspective?
Put a camera on the women?
Yes. So this is the first time, because usually in CrossFit you have like either the men or women are on the floor and they're getting full coverage, and all the heats get full coverage. Right. And then they swap the days. So on one day, like the women go first and then the men go second. On the next day, the men go first. So they're like mindful about how they're presenting and covering.
And I will say, like, when we went, they also had like female announcers in the stands. Yeah. Like, it was pretty like on top of, because their female athletes are some of their biggest stars. Like, it's just.
Yeah. That's why it was such a why it was such a like jarring experience for me to watch this, to have like, they had just one camera. They had one drone. Right. So you could see, eventually you did see overhead shots of like Tia and the other women further back. And then they had one camera on And as you know, that camera from triathlon, because we've made this mistake a lot in triathlon, like that on the front of the race. So when you had so Tia went out and she like within the first minute, she's like running in the top 5. Right. And then she came into the rower. So that's where like a lot of the guys, so they ran 4 miles first, quite far. Right. So, but she was like way up in the overall in the field. But you didn't get to like see her run, like the way like you were spending several minutes watching the men at the front, like watching their stride and you didn't get to see her do that. Like you got the overhead drone shot, you got like some shots that showed, oh yeah, there she is in 5th, but you didn't get to like just kind of watch her flow run.
It feels like they just didn't like every like marathon, triathlon, like cycling, like gravel cycling has gone through this realization and evolution that like, yes, you have to also have cameras on the women's field. They need their own race, their own coverage, or otherwise they just get mixed up in the men. It feels like they just like didn't think about it.
It's like they didn't think about it, or they forgot, or like something just, whatever. So, and it's partially because CrossFit has typically been so good at that I was kind of
that you were like,
jarred
what?
By that.
You're like, this is an Iron Man.
Yeah. Exactly. And then the other thing that was a little jarring for me was that they had like, for most of the weekend, they had 3 male commentators, and then they like brought in sub commentators. And like, for example, in that Run Row Run, that was the first event, they did have a woman that was like coming in but their 3 main commentators were men, which I thought was a little bit of an oversight, especially when you have 3. Like, can you not find one woman?
Right. I would say sometimes I find it really annoying that they always add like 1 woman and 2 men, and then they're always like, in all sports, they always like when they have 3 commentators, they're always like, well, we have a woman, see, and then they're like, well, you could have a second woman, and they're like, whoa,
yeah,
don't get crazy with the women. Like,
right. Well, now they just entirely forgot to have
I will say, people notice this, right? Because again, like we've spent a lot of time at running races and triathlons, and I don't know how many times I've had like the race organizers, race directors be like, well, what could we do to welcome more women? And then on the other hand, I have so many women come up to me and saying like, the male commentators like didn't know any of the women athletes, or they were like making little jokes about the women, or they just weren't like giving the women as much. Yeah. And like people notice this stuff. You think it doesn't matter, or that we're just being like bitchy, but like they notice.
Yeah. So in this case, like the male commentators do know the female athletes, and they're generally very respectful. And it's not the same like they don't fall into those same traps. But at the same time, I'd love to hear a female voice in the commentary. But I definitely had a lot of thoughts on this. Like it's the first event. It's run 4 miles, row 3K, run 2 miles, right? And they knew that it was going to be that from May 20th.
Okay.
Which is
so
CrossFit
it's like
terms,
2 months to train for this.
That's a giant runway in CrossFit terms of like knowing what you're going to do, right? And just like watching how prepared Tia was, like if you think about even the very little I know about her training, that she did high rocks this year, right? Like watching how well she was like aerobically conditioned to take on that. Like it actually really made me think that like, I think this is the theory. I would love someone to come who like really is in the weeds about like elite CrossFit training. But like, I think that there is a space for someone to come along and really just like get a lot more out of their aerobic development and train their like aerobic threshold, their anaerobic threshold, their lactate tolerance a lot better than some of these athletes do. Because when you see that Tia, who would have done that for high rocks training, she would have been on the track training all of these things, then was like just running in 5th place with the men. I'm like, of course she is.
Of course she is. I mean, she obviously is a very well-prepared athlete and a very smart athlete, I think.
Yeah.
And to your point, I mean, you and I talked about this maybe a couple years ago about CrossFit as it was evolving. You do see an advancement then in training methods. Like this is true in every sport. Like as more and more people, as it has a longer history, as more people do it, as there's more money, they start to learn more about training and adjust. So it's probably coming.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is my theory now. My working theory is that there's going to be another group of athletes who kind of get the like how to train their aerobic systems better, right? To like, because even the other events, especially like the longer ones, as soon as you're over a couple minutes, right?
Right. It's like a different system.
You're like, you crisscross between systems. Right. And like being trained and having like a high lactate tolerance is always going to help you. So I've always kind of thought that since I started CrossFit, but now I'm just going to wager right here on the podcast.
You should just utilize your knowledge here, Sarah, and become an amazing CrossFit athlete at 48
or however old you are.
Or however old you are.
Yeah. Exactly. So then, as we go through the weekend, it's really cool. It's like interesting to watch. Like, so Tia obviously comes out like on top, wins her 8th title, right. And
shout out to our guest last week too. Ariel was 5th, I believe.
Yes, Ariel finished 5th. At one point, she was in 3rd place. I was like low key cheering for her, of course, because they talked to her, so I had that little extra connection. So actually, just watching, like, then the opposite happened with, there was one event that was like you had to climb the pegboard.
I saw that. You know that always seems. Yeah, and I have to tell you, these are the ones that really. This is what's going to stop me, Sarah, from being an amazing CrossFit athlete.
Oh, this is what it's going to be.
This is it, yeah.
It's the pegboard, or
it's the gymnastic skills and the hand stuff. It's too difficult.
Too much. It's not the lifting, Kelly?
No.
Okay. Okay. So you like climb this pegboard, and it's like, basically, for anyone who doesn't know, it's like wooden peg, and there's holes in the wall, and you have to like climb this thing, right? And so they had only found out like the day before that they were doing it a day. None of them got to try the actual equipment on the floor before they went out there. So it's like the opposite of the run, where they're like literally all out there for the first time. And Tia's shoes did not grip on like the surface of the, like, it was like some plexiglass or something, some clear plastic.
Saw that, yeah.
And so like by a fluke of like something that you could never have helped or seen coming, you're just suddenly like, she had won the first 2 events, and suddenly she's at this like massive disadvantage where her feet are sliding. At some point, she's climbing to the top with like just her arms. Like, she doesn't even.
Yeah, for people who haven't seen this, you have to pull, like, Sarah's doing gestures, but this is a podcast, so you can't see. And for people who haven't seen this, you have to pull a peg out of its like slot with your hand while you're holding on to the other one, and then put it up again, like, to climb up with just your arm. And so it's very hard to do while you're like hanging by one arm, pulling a peg out with the other arm. Yeah. Which is why people use their feet to like prop themselves up.
A little bit of traction helps.
Right. A little bit of traction.
Yeah. It was just kind of this amazing like sports moment for me of like, that she ended up 16th in that event. Right. But she like kept calm and like
figured it out,
and just like did the best that she could, which is all I guess you ever can do. Yeah, so they did that, and then they did heavy cleans, and then they went back to, then it was kind of a descending reps on that event. But I thought that was like very, very interesting. And then the rest was like filled with like all the usual CrossFit amazingness, like handstand walking, the deficit handstand push-ups were amazing, box jumps, the usual stuff.
Normal stuff. Running around with sacks, as my husband always says. Yeah.
Yes, stuff like that. So yeah, I was like I loved watching it, got really into it, and it was great.
Good. The other big one this weekend, the other one that we talked about a bunch last 2 weeks, is the Tour de France Femmes. And I watched some of that. Me and 25 million people in France watched it.
Right? Like, yeah. I mean, once their girl was like, gunning for the win, like, France is going to get behind that.
Yeah, I will say yesterday randomly, like, I live in an area with a lot of rich 40, 50 something cycling guys, and one of them just unprompted to me was like, "Did you see the Tour de France Femmes? It was so exciting. I watched every stage. It used to not be good, but now it's good." And you're like, "Okay, yeah." But anyway, so it's really brought in a big audience. And I've been texting with people there, and one of the photographers, Dominique Powers, if you follow her, she has like amazing photos, and she was doing these behind the scenes crew diaries, and she sent a voicemail right after the race about what it was like.
Hey there, it's Dominique Powers. I just wrapped up a week of photographing the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift. And it gets better every year, I've got to say. This year the course started in Brittany and went across the country, ending in the French Alps, and there were fans lining the roads the whole way. It was just incredible. I think that having Pauline Ferrand-Prévot be a part of the peloton this year was, a huge thing to bring in more local fans. We got to drive on the course a fair amount with the press stickers that we had for the car, and every third or fourth person was holding a sign for Pauline. And now after her win, I can't wait to see what happens next year. It's kind of getting some behind the scenes intel of the fact that 5 million people tuned in France to watch the end of stage 8. Like, that is just incredible. So I think, biggest takeaway from this year is just how much the sport has grown and how much it's going to continue to grow. And that is really exciting. It's always a long week. You know that going into it, that it's really going to push you physically and mentally and emotionally. I definitely added a bit more on my plate this year doing the crew diaries. Me and my team, my assistant Tim and my partner Ken, who comes every year and drives. I would not have been able to do nearly half of what I set out to do without their support, physically helping carry my equipment and gear, and also, logistically, Ken finding us lunch when we get to the start town while Tim and I run off and work on the various projects that I have for that day. It was definitely a team effort to accomplish everything that we set out to, but, it's a really wonderful feeling walking away from a week like that, being really proud of the work that I was able to create, and, feeling like I really did the race and the athletes justice with the photographs that I captured, and, just feeling really grateful for the opportunity to have been there and share it and, create photographs and content that really brought viewers into the race and into the experience of being there. So, I hope that folks that want to go that haven't make it happen, because experiencing the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift in person is unlike anything else.
So you heard her say, and I heard this from everybody else too, is that like every third sign was for Pauline. Like all the French crowds were out there. Yeah. She's the first French rider to win like men or women's tour in a couple decades. The president called her like in the middle of her press conference to thank, like he posted on Instagram, the president of France, like congratulating her. So I think it crossed over into full on mainstream.
Yeah. It's so interesting because the Tour de France Femmes has hit this inflection point this year, it seems like, and what a great way to like continue that inflection point by having a French winner. So I'm kind of glad, because I think that'll like propel it forward. Whereas like last year coming out of the Tour de France Femmes, I felt like, and you and I are like slightly like 1 degree of separation from being insiders of like, what goes on there internally. Okay. And like it felt last year a little bit like what I was hearing was, we're not sure, sponsors aren't sure, not sure it's going to continue. And we were all just like a bit like white knuckled hanging on, hoping that this was going to continue for years, because as we've talked about a couple of times in the podcast, like women's tours in France and elsewhere have like historically like come and gone. The sponsors are there, they're not. The money's there, they're not. The federation supports it, they don't. So like now just seeing this inflection point, seeing the ROI that Zwift is getting for being the title sponsor, I just feel.
I think last year, like going into last year, there was a lot of nervousness for sure. And then last year's race was so exciting because it came out of the 4 seconds on the last day. And then it was a little bit like this year we all thought it was going to be a rematch. And then all these people came, I want to say out of retirement, but a few of them came out of retirement. And Pauline Ferrand-Prévot, she had shifted over to mountain biking for the last decade. And she came back to the road just to win this. So there was all these people coming back. Yeah. And so I think that helped. And yeah, you're right. It was kind of like, how can we top it? And then they managed to top it. And so now I think you really have this momentum and it's like pretty solidified. I do have to say, she has had a crazy 12 months. She won Olympic gold in mountain biking in Paris. Again, like French in Paris. And that was huge crowds. Then she won Paris-Roubaix earlier this year, Paris-Roubaix Femmes.
Wow.
And then she won this. And so she's also like the first rider to win all those. And I have to say, there's a little bit of, some people were like sharing that meme in Pretty Woman when you go back, when Julia Roberts goes back and is like, huge mistake not to serve me. Yeah. Because the team she was on as a mountain biker didn't want to start a women's road team. So she had to leave and she left.
Right.
And you're like, oh, huge mistake.
Huge mistake. That is Pretty Woman. I love that.
Yeah. She also like had gone over to mountain biking because there just really wasn't like a avenue to be a professional road. I mean, obviously it was professional road cycling, but there just wasn't like the money and the sponsors and all that. And she won like, God, I don't even, 10 world titles and everything. Like and so to come back now because there is this event and there is this huge sponsorship and these huge crowds, it's kind of like, oh yeah, it's how it works, Sarah. It's like investment, and then athletes, and then viewers, and then more investment.
And then people, and then everyone's saying, we always watch the Tour de France Femmes. Of course. Nobody ever said it was boring, Kelly.
No. Well, yeah. She also, so Demi Vollering, who was kind of the favorite, ended up second, had a big crash in the middle of the week, and there was a lot of drama around, which we talked about last week.
I mean, second is still a big result for her too, like and returning champion and crash and everything. So
yeah, I mean, I think it was like good. I don't think she was happy, but that's right. I mean, I think when Nike pays you $1 million to win,
when she's my age, Kelly, she's going to be happy.
Maybe. I actually have recently decided that part of the reason I was never world champion, Sarah, is because I would have been fine with second. And then Kasia, who won last year, was third. So it was all very close going into the Queen stage. They were all like very close together. There were also some surprises. And Pauline on that Queen stage just was like super, super dominant. Like put 3 minutes into the, like, it was nuts. So she is really, really strong. She has trained very, very hard for this. And like one of the things she keeps saying is like she sacrificed a lot and now it's like worth it. Which is always like a little, you're always like, oh, I don't know, it's a balance, right? Because you have to everyone there sacrificed a lot.
Right.
And you don't always win.
Yeah. No, that's true. And then is it worth it?
Right.
If you don't win. It's, one of my friends once said to me, and I know this is like an obvious thing to say, but she just said it at like a very good moment that like sport, she wasn't saying it to me, but about someone else. Like sport doesn't owe you anything. No. Right. Which is like, literally how everyone who didn't win but sacrificed a lot feels, or like understands, is that like there's like you're rolling the dice on achieving something that one person out of that whole group of women achieves,
Yeah. And everyone else tries just as hard and trains, except for Tia-Clair Toomey. She trains harder than
I don't know.
I'm kidding, but yeah. And I do think, to your point about cycling being at an inflection, women's cycling being at an inflection point, viewership and sponsorship wise, I think it's also at this interesting point in terms of the riders and kind of like, there's a lot of debate right now about, like if they add more races, they'll be at these like the number of race days is increasing, which is why you're seeing more injury and illness. They don't have the same support as the men's team. So if you're going to up the number of days, you need to up the number of support. They also don't have the same size of teams, so the athletes have to do more races to support their key ride. So it's like it's sort of like what happens now,
And we had that. Did we talk about it last week? About when Demi getting the concussion and then not having proper concussion protocols in place, like those kinds of things that are like right in place for the men's race, like those are things that can matter, like to someone, not just someone continuing with the race, but to like their long-term health.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of sort of questions right now in women's cycling. They're sort of like, what happens now? Like how, what is like, not in a bad, but like what happens next? Like, do we add race? Do we add team sizes? Do we add athletes? Do we add development pathways? Do we add races? Do we need more money? Do we need more protocol? Like, and then you kind of also know that you don't necessarily, we've talked about this before, want to make the same mistakes the men made. Like men's cycling has a long history of like, for like doping and disordered eating, and they're all like starving and massive safety issues. And so you're like, well, we don't necessarily want to do those things.
Right. And then how do you learn from that and yet create, like, how many of those things are actually unavoidable? Like, you know what I mean? Like there's always people who are going to be willing to cheat, or when people think that other people are cheating, they will cheat, which we've talked about before. I think the what did you say? Disordered eating, or like that whole piece of it is very interesting because you have this like obvious performance benefit of being light, which easily goes awry when you're like trying to manage a heavy training load, and working with people on how much to eat. And then you see, like, then you always, for every athlete that has like the support system of like, I don't know, I'm just going to exaggerate now, but has a support system of like 12 nutritionists and dietitians. You have another athlete who's like chipping away, trying to make it to that level, who has no support, but just thinks she can get there by eating less.
That doesn't work.
That's
great.
Problematic.
Right.
So yeah, and it was interesting how that like whole conversation about weight and food was like kind of playing out in the media a little bit too.
Yeah, it definitely came up after Pauline's win. And I think to your, like, as you're saying, like, it's always been a conversation that's there in cycling, right? Like in the men's tour, they were talking about like Jonas was like, I think I lost too much weight. And there's been this like, how much do they eat thing that's like underlying all of men's cycling. So it's not a new conversation. And about a month ago, Pauline had posted to her Instagram story basically about losing weight, like, and skipping breakfast to like lose weight to get, which is not like super healthy. And she also has like a history of disorder, like she's talked about this before. So we like know that there are some issues there. And so I think that's part of why it then became this big topic, is that she had been talking about it. And then she has very clearly, as said, she lost 4 kilograms between Paris-Roubaix and the Tour de France Femmes, because those are very different races. And to your point, like she did it with the team of nutritionists and a whole support system. And it's not something like it's not something you should just do, and it's also not necessarily healthy. And she said, you know, this isn't something she's like going to maintain this weight, like this is just for this race,
right?
But it's also like there's this part of me that's like, I don't think that's why she won. I think she won because in her head she thought she had done everything she possibly could, and she was super super fit, and she like attacked on the climb.
Well said. And
this was just part of, in her head, she like was like, I did everything, I sacrificed so much.
Yeah, and I don't think, like, first of all, athletes of any standard should be trying to, like, lose weight while in the middle of a difficult training block without some kind of understanding about LEA, what that is, and how you end up with low energy availability, which actually means that, like, your body doesn't lose weight. Instead, it just starts to shut down its various systems. And that could be, like, different for different women, right? So some people stop menstruating. Some people, like, their other parts of their bodies shut down. Now I'm struggling to find another example, but like it doesn't necessarily, like, we think sometimes that those calories that we're sacrificing like come straight from our fat stores and like leave. They do not. That's not how it works.
No, I think like like a lot of people start getting sick all the time. They have trouble sleeping. They get like what was the other? Oh, you like broke like stress fractures, like injury. So it's one of those things, like when you're getting a lot of injuries and you're sick all the time, that's not making you faster.
Right. And then the comeback from that is very difficult. So like when when we were talking about this before the show, I said as well, like when I talked to our lightweight Canadian rowing pair earlier, I guess last year before Paris, like hearing how they cut down, because they have to be a certain combined weight in the boat. Right. So they're like, literally they had a support system of 4 different qualified people to help them like lose. It was around the same amount. Like it was around 4 kilos for Jenny in particular. And I remember thinking like, yes, like no one who's trying to do even any kind of level of athletic endeavor should be trying to lose weight without like a support team so that you know that you're recovering from your sessions, right? Like otherwise just like regular us should just keep the 4 extra kilos. Like we're going to perform better that way. I'll keep my 4 kilos, Kelly.
Yeah, on my little mini bike camp with my brother-in-law this weekend, I was like,
the one where you,
yeah, the one where I kept leaving him. But I did have to keep eating because I was like, oh man, I am not going to make it through this.
Yeah, sometimes there's no amount of eating that can get you through. Sometimes it's just like you actually have to go home. Yeah. Sounds like you found that line. Sounds anyway, like continue.
So anyway, it was a little unfortunate, obviously, that this whole conversation then became like kind of overshadowing her achievements and like how crazy a year she's had. I think if she hadn't posted to her own Instagram a few weeks ago, it probably wouldn't have become as big a conversation. It's always sort of there when we talk about athletes, especially cyclists. And there's also been some interesting fighting within the peloton in women. I think not fighting is not the right word because that makes it sound like catfighty, but there's been some who gets to be in charge, who's leading, who's the dominant, like who's supposed to win, who thinks they should have the acquiescence of the rest of the field. So it's been a lot of
I think
comments.
It's always this a thing in cycling. It's just now it's like playing out in the women's field as well.
Right.
And we're going to have more of that, right? Because the more, like the deeper the field, which is what's happening now, is that there's like more and more women who could win. It's like harder and harder to get on these teams. There's more and more teams. Like as that progression continues, is going to be more potential winners and more people who think they should be queen bee,
right?
Even within a team,
right, which is what like broke up one of the big teams last year. Was there was like 3 people who could win, and it was like, wow. But it was a pretty exciting race, even according to the cycling guys at my coffee shop. And I think I feel good now about the future, that it's going to like stick around for a while.
Amazing. I love that I do think that the cycling guys at your coffee shop are the bar.
Yeah.
For this, like when like the average everyday person is actually talking about it, which like 5 years ago they were not. Well, the race didn't exist, but 4 years ago they were not. Right. But I have to say, Kelly, also, you did not lead us astray when you sent everyone to watch the 800-meter race
in the
swimming with Katie Ledecky and Summer McIntosh. I feel like that was maybe the most exciting swimming race that's ever happened, especially in recent years when Katie Ledecky's just been like winning by miles and miles, right? To have this like head-to-head incredible race with 3 women
in the swimming world championships. Last week I told everyone to watch the 800 meters between Katie Ledecky and Summer McIntosh, and now I am losing the other woman's name from Australia who is also in the mix there. It was like 5 a.m. our time on Sunday, so I had to like get up and replay it, but it was very exciting. There's something like there has never been an 800-meter race where 2 women had gone under 8:10 before, and in this race 3 women went on like 8:07 or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was something crazy.
It was like 8:06, 8:06, and 8:07 they went. Yeah.
So it was a big jump, and then I guess like so Summer we were talked last week about, she was going for her record 5 individual. She ended up bronze in the 800, so she only got 4 individual golds and a bronze. Yeah. But Katie then won her 7th world title in the 800 meters over 12. It was like 12 or 13 years. It's like basically she won her first one as like a 15-year-old, and she's been winning it every 2 years since then,
which is crazy. Insane. Yeah. And this was, I believe, her 3rd fastest time.
Yeah.
Which says a lot for like Summer and the Australian woman whose name you can't remember, that they were right there with her, right? And the next generation is like starting to catch up to Katie's insanely fast paces in the long course.
Oh, definitely.
But like I think it was the way it played out too, how they were like all just like head to head for like hundreds of meters, yes. And you don't see that often in swimming. So that's what made it like just wildly like stroke for stroke, just laugh.
I was laughing because afterwards Summer McIntosh was like, well, I didn't have the race I wanted. I like messed up on strategy. And I was like, what is the strategy? Like, obviously this is, but I was like, what's the strategy? Did you want to go faster and you didn't go faster? Like, I was like,
no, Kelly. Okay. You've done enough endurance for it to know.
But an 800-meter swimming in your own lane in a pool is kind of time trialing.
So, but they were like in 3 lanes next to each other. So they all knew where each other was, right? And at like 700 meters, she made a surge. So I'm going to she made a surge and she was ahead for like a moment.
So you think that's what she meant?
Yeah, I would guess that's what she meant, that she went too soon, basically. Which in an endurance race is probably the play. Like you try to make a break and it either takes or doesn't. So I think that's what
I was just like, how much strategy is there in swimming, really? But anyway,
all of your best swimming commentary right here on the Feist.
Well, the other thing was, so the U.S. Team had like massive stomach flu and had a really rough like first half of the meet, and then they kind of bounced back. It sounds like it was actually like way worse than they were letting. Like people lost like 10 pounds, 15 pounds with stomach flu, and then so there was a lot of kind of underperformances and scratches, like pulling people out and subbing people in, and so they weren't doing great for like the U.S. swimming. Mm-hmm. And fucking Michael Phelps and Ryan Lochte posted like these memes that were like RIP U.S. swimming, like 1970 to 2025. It's been a good run kind of thing. And it was like, what? Guys.
Did they not know? Like, how did we know about the stomach flu and they didn't?
I mean, I think they did. I think they were just like, we would have overcome
They were being funny. Oh, yeah.
But then, of course, the women saved the day. The U.S. women won 8 of the U.S.'s 9 gold medals. Wow. And they set a world record on the last day in the medley relay. So you're like, yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. And honestly, having survived the norovirus Paris outbreak of 2024, I can tell you that like bouncing back from something like that into like,
World Championship swimming.
Into World Championship form is like quite something. So kudos to those US athletes.
So anyway, you're like, Michael Phelps, Ryan, like, come on. So I did watch a lot of that because I turned on NBC like randomly in the weekend, and they were doing a recap of the whole Swimming World Championships, which confused the shit out of me at first because they were showing from the whole week, and they showed like Summer's first gold medal from like earlier in the week, and I didn't realize they were recapping the whole week, so I was just like, they made her do it again? What? Like, because I knew it had already happened like 7 days ago, and I was like, why are they? Because it's one thing when you like recap like the day's events. I didn't realize they were recapping 9 days events into 90 minutes.
Right.
So I thought we just like were making Summer swim the 200 IM.
Just keep swimming.
Yeah.
It was so impressive.
Yeah.
We just need to do it again.
But so they did that. So I watched. So NBC aired the whole week in like 90 minutes, and then they did U.S. track national championships. So I watched a bunch of that also, which. Shout out to U.S. track and field. They did para outdoor nationals and regular outdoor nationals together for the first time. So that was pretty cool. So then they were mixing in some like para races on the coverage. And there was like a para high jump world record set. So it was like, that was nice and like a good mix up. But U.S. track and field nationals were crazy, wild. So
how are they wild? Tell me. I did not see. I missed this completely. So
you missed this completely.
Tell me.
Well, first off, we started with Sha'Carri Richardson got arrested at the Seattle airport, like flying.
Oh yeah, I did see that. Yeah. Yes.
And it sounds like there was video because, of course, it was like in an airport. So of course, people had cell phone videos, right? Like you were never going to be able to be arrested for anything in the world anymore without there being a cell phone video of it somewhere. And it sounds like it was just sort of, or it looked like and sounded like her and her boyfriend, who's also a runner, just got in like a fight, and she like shoved him and threw something at him. Which I'm not saying that's good. I'm just saying that's what happened. And then the police showed up, and they were like, well, we have to arrest her because he was like, this doesn't warrant. They're both black, and also like, I think I'm saying they're both black because in America, for people who are not from America, like I don't think that makes you very amenable to police intervention.
Right.
And so he was like, no, we don't need police. We're like sorting it out ourselves.
For good reason, not amenable to police.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but they were like, well, we got called by airport security. We have to arrest her. So she spent 19 hours in detention, which kind of sucks and is a rough way. And then she ran just the heats of the 100 and didn't run the final because she has a bye because she's the world champion. And then she didn't make the final of the 200.
Wow.
I know.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that wouldn't affect you.
I know.
You know, like not to be. Now I get to like take wild guesses, but like being arrested sucks. Yeah. Having it be public sucks. Yeah. And then also like that doesn't sound like a great relationship to me.
Right. Well, I was like to be fair, I have like definitely yelled at my husband, but no one has called the police on us. Right. So okay. I think there was a few factors there. So that sucks. Or that was how the meet got started. That was a lot.
Okay.
And then then on the good side, the very first race of the 4-day meet was the 10,000 meter, and Emily Infeld won her first national title at 35 years old, which is like kind of
read about
that. And like
actually in your newsletter, Kelly, your excellent newsletter.
If you don't subscribe to the Feist newsletter,
yes,
and you would rather read all your news every week instead of listen, and she won. So her first national championships was in 2010, and she's never won. She's always been like 5th or 2nd or 3rd or 8th, and she finally won a national title, which is awesome. And she's had a really tough. If anyone knows her story or her name, it's because she's had a tough few years. Like she's been injured. She like separated with her team, like her coach and sponsors dropped her. She had a stalker for like 3 years. That was like a whole mess situation.
Yeah.
So for her to, and I think she thought she was done. I think she was like, oh, I'm like my best years are behind me is what she said. She thought, and then to win, it's kind of awesome.
Yes, good for her. So can I double click on the stalker situation? Do you know anything about it?
Yeah, she talked about it a lot when it was getting, I don't want to say resolved, but when they finally like arrested the guy and he got charged a couple years ago. Yeah. But for like 3 years, and this is a recurring theme when like women have stalkers, is that it was very, very hard, I think, for the police to take it seriously, because internet, it's like, what jurisdiction is it? Like, oh, well, he's just making threats online. We don't, like, your local police are like, I don't know what to do with that. And then he was like following her, like she moved, he found her address. It was stuff like that. And he was like showing, so it was not great. This was after she was in the Olympics, and somehow he just got obsessed.
Yes.
There was a recent situation where like Caitlin Clark had a stalker too, who was just charged.
Where it like, and now there was a weird, I remember like some of the weird reports coming out of that one where like he somehow believed he was in a relationship with her, but also somehow like was aware that he should be arrested and what he did was wrong. Which I was like, how are these two things balancing in your brain?
It happens.
Like, listen to one voice and not the other.
So it was not good. So it was, I think there was a joke that it took her an hour, Emily Infeld, an hour to do her victory lap, because she just knows so many people in the sport after this, and everyone was so happy for her. So it was,
fantastic.
So that was really great. And then Nikki Hiltz won another 1500 meter title, which is always nice to see, and it was very exciting. And then there were just like all these upsets. You want to get like super detailed, you know. Gabby Thomas, who is the defending Olympic champ at the 200, almost didn't make the world's team. She had to like lean, dive.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a very exciting meet overall.
Cool.
I will say though, the big story kind of going into the national championships was this announcement last week, right before, from the international.
What are you gonna say? I'm like cringing already.
You're like, oh. So the international governing body for track and field, called World Athletics, announced like 2 days before this meet that they were going to reinstitute sex testing for women. So like women have to get a little card that verifies they're a woman via gene testing. It's going to be I thought it was effective immediately. It's actually effective September 1st. You have to do a once in a lifetime cheek swab or blood test of the SRY gene, which is a gene that is on the Y chromosome that helps dictate some sex determinant characteristics, but obviously it's way more complicated than that, because anyway.
I think it's supposed to show whether, if you have a Y chromosome, which mostly is men, but occasionally women, whether that chromosome is like
well, the actual test just tests for this gene, and this gene is found on the Y chromosome. So the logic is, if you have the gene, you have a Y chromosome. Now, as we're about to talk in a second, whether or not you have the gene does not actually determine whether or not you have testicles or male, because it's like way more complicated than that.
Right.
Yeah,
like obviously if you're going to do sex testing, right, you have to have a test that actually shows something that would be an advantage to you, right? And then like if you can't show that, I mean, I have several other arguments.
I feel like you're jumping so far ahead, but they announced that they were going to implement gene testing of this gene that is found on the Y chromosome starting September 1st, which is because then it's right before the World Championships. So if you want to compete as a woman, you have to get this test, and then you get like in a database that says you're a woman. The testing itself is going to be left to each country's governing body, which raises a whole bunch more questions, because like, how is like some of these poorer countries going to, like, who's going to pay for it? It's been like... who's gonna pay for it? How's it gonna be tested? Do all of these places have laboratories that can do this? Like, is it like there's not a lot of details on how that's gonna work yet. Obviously, in the U.S. or Canada or the UK, like we do have these labs, and I'm still not clear if like athletes are gonna have to pay for themselves or if the governing body will pay. Anyway, so that got announced, and it was like, it's super, super frustrating. And I will like shout out to Nikki Hiltz, because they got asked about it, and they were the only athlete who spoke out about it during the nationals.
Good for them.
And they were like, and they brought up a lot of the issues I have, which is just like, this isn't exactly how sex works. There's a slippery slope. Like, we have a long history of demanding that women prove that they're women in sport. This is going to be bad. Like, it's going to trickle down to be bad. It's like, sure, at an Olympic level, there's just not that many athletes, and but it's going to trickle down to be bad for NCAA athletes, for youth athletes. Like, what are we doing? So the thing for me that caught me was that article that you sent, I think this morning, in our Slack channel, that was by Andrew Sinclair, who was the guy who like discovered the SRY gene that they are now testing, right? And he was basically like,
you can't use this as a sex test. Right. And like, okay, because basically he's like using the SRY to establish biological sex is wrong because it tells you, like, it only tells you whether or not the gene is present. It does not tell you how SRY is functioning or whether testes have formed or whether testosterone is produced. And it can, or whether like it can be, that testosterone could be used by the body even if you were producing it, right? So it doesn't tell you any of the actual factors that you would need to know if there was some kind of biological advantage, right? And then he also made the point about testing in wealthier countries. Like, and that like the testing process, this is an interesting one, like the testing process is very sensitive. So if you're not in like a super, super controlled lab and you have like a male technician, that like his actual actual DNA could like contaminate, like something from even a little skin cell can like contaminate and produce a false positive for SRY. So like it just like, even the guy who discovered the gene is like, this does not work for this purpose, right? Like you cannot, if you don't know, if nature itself, many people have quoted this, but like if nature itself does not provide a line, right? A clear line between male and female. Like, how are we going to do that for the purposes of sport?
Yeah, I mean, it's his point, and he had a bunch of examples, was that, like, there are different conditions, and we're going to get the names wrong, but we can, like, share the link to the art, like, his piece that he wrote. But there are different conditions where, like, you might have the gene, but then the gene doesn't act on the rest of the things that it would need to do to, like, develop male sex characteristics. Or it does act on them, but then they're like they don't actually engage with like testosterone, and like you look female, you have always thought you were female, you never had any idea you weren't female, like that, like right? And then you take one of these tests and they're like, oh, you have a internal testes and a non-performing Y chromosome, like, and you'd be like, what? So there's I'm going to get the same, there's 4 or 5 different conditions kind of like this that, and it's not a ton of people, but there's a reason. When they used this test back in the 90s, again, the scientists back then waged a campaign to say, like, this isn't how this test should be used. This test is only a genetic test to help, like, determine if a gene is there for, like, you use it sometimes in, what's the word? The testing you do when a baby's not born yet?
Prenatal.
Right, thank you. To, like, determine if they have one of these, like, sex differences, like Turner syndrome or something. Right. So the scientists waged a campaign back in the 90s to be like, this is like all these reasons it doesn't work, or it's not great, it's not going to do what you want it to do, it's not going to stop men from like masquerading as women. All it's going to do is some women are going to find out that they like had a different gene they didn't know about, and they're going to be like, what?
Yeah. And I don't even feel confident that in some of these places it's like the World Athletics is saying, like, it's making a lot of like one-liners about like that the women will have their, I forget, like, privacy will not be invaded, like lines like this, basically kind of referring back to like the previous ways that even 10 years ago, women athletes who were like born women like never even knew they might fail some kind of chromosome test, are like hauled in and I'm so mad about it. Hauled in and like having their fucking clit like palpitated to see what happens. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you're like, that's 10 years ago. Like, I don't feel confident that this is not like a slippery slope to like, well, we don't have enough money for SRI testing, but like, why don't all the little girls just take off their pants and show us that they're girls? Like, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you're getting to the point. I feel like we should go back where like the history of sex testing in sport is that there is not a lot of evidence that there's ever really been a man masquerading as a woman at like an Olympic level, right? There's these like myths and these like stories that it happened, but when you dive into them,
like in a handful of stories,
there's a handful of stories, and they like
look them all up very easily. It's like just a few. It's not very many.
And then when you look into them, it's likely that wasn't. There's like, you know what I mean? Like there was like a German athlete who was a woman and competed as a woman and then later transitioned to be a man, but then had to hide it because like being a trans man was not looked upon well in like 1940s Germany. And so then that becomes this story that like, oh, there was a man. But anyway, so there are not a lot of proof that men ever masqueraded as women. But there became this fear coming out of those stories in like the 40s that men were going to pretend to be women to be in the Olympics. And then I don't think it's, sorry to interrupt, I just don't think it's like a, what would you call it?
I don't think I think it's like because then going into the 50s and you had this like the feminine mystique years of like femininity was very narrowly defined like in short term after that. So I think like how we define femininity and this sex testing are like kind of
it got very wrapped up together. And then you also had a lot of these concerns about like sports were going to make women more manly. And so then early on you had just, and this is not genetic testing, but you have to understand like where this idea that like, we have to make sure they're women came from. And you had a lot of stuff where it was like, oh, well, they have husbands, therefore they are women, right? Like, or, oh, you like make sure they don't look too manly and like dress well to prove that they are women. Because you just had a lot of fears about somehow there was going to turn them manly. And like, this is where this is all based in, right?
Right. And then if you even go just if you go historically just like another decade ahead, you have like, you come to like Billie Jean King and like athletes who, like LGBTQ athletes then who are afraid to come out because of this like history myth that somehow they're less feminine or something like that needing to hide or appear very feminine in the public image, you know, versus like in order to even be an athlete, like just
so they had so this was like it feels like a lot of these fears have always been wrapped up in this, and there's not really a lot of proof that is like that there is a real problem. So then you had like actual like they called it like nude parades, doctors like examining women in order to compete at the Olympics. And that happened for a few years. And then they instituted a first round of like genetic female testing in like the 70s, which was literally just like looking to see if you had 2 X chromosomes. And that's where we got into some of these early stories of like people who like there was like a famously like a Spanish sprinter runner who had no idea and then found out she had like a hidden Y chromosome and her boyfriend dumped her and she like lost all this money and she was like shamed by her family. And so it becomes like this so that happened all through the 70s and 80s. And then we shifted to this SRY testing in the 90s, which is like a gene on the Y chromosome. And then and basically throughout that whole 30 years that we had sex testing on a genetic level, all the scientists kept saying like, this is not how sex works at a biological in nature level. Like there's lots of different processes that have to get triggered and happen in like thousands of different ways. It's not just like, you either have X chromosome or have the 2 X's or the XY done, which I feel like is how everybody learns in school. And then they're just like, oh, this is what it is. But that's like not how it actually is.
The number of people I've talked to just who I've informed of that, like that actually it's not clean cut. Like all men do not have XY and all women do not have XX chromosomes. Like that's just not how biology works. There is like a messy middle, like all things with biology.
And I feel like if you just take that fact, you separate it from like trans athlete debates right now and feelings and politics and like crazy ads running on American TV, you are just like the actual science is like it's not that clear. And now it's not a huge number. It's somewhere between like 0.2 and 1.7% of the population fall in like kind of depending on what you count as intersex or not. But that's still like at the Atlanta Olympics, which are the last ones they did sex testing, 8 women tested positive for like the SRY gene, and 7 of them it was like non-performing, like the gene didn't enact anything, and then the 8th one had a different condition that like didn't use the testosterone. But these are like 8 women who are like, wait, what? Like,
yeah, and they're just for all they know women, right? Like that's why when we get those percentages of like how many folks are actually intersex, you have a whole nother group who like don't have any external markers. Like you wouldn't know unless you were sex tested because you were going to the Olympics or to a world championships in athletics. Right.
And so I think it's like important when we talk about this to understand that this, like these are related debates and they've gotten really mixed up. And I'm personally obviously of the opinion that like trans women are women and like, but this is we're not talking about somebody who transitioned at any point. We're talking about people who were told they were female when they were born, have always thought they were female.
It could be anybody.
It could be anybody.
Is the point. Like it could be you. It could be me. Like, because we have not had this test.
Yeah. Though I will say in the World Athletics announcement, when they were like going through the like current rules and stuff, they were like, and none of these rules apply to trans athletes because there are no elite trans women competing at an international level. And I was like, cool guys, great.
I like that part too.
Yeah,
like,
part 2. Anyway. Yeah.
Like how about not even acknowledge like why we're having this conversation right now, you know, like, oh my God. And then like the other thing I get super frustrated with is like for some reason, as humans, we have this ability to believe that like somehow like our modern ways of doing things are better, and that like we're not going to fall into the traps that like we did in the 90s, or like we did in the 70s, or all the things we just talked about, like the nude parades in the 60s. Like we're not going to fall back into those traps. Now we know. Now we have modern science, and it's like, okay, first of all, that's not how history works, and history literally tells us that like we do, and like we repeat the same mistakes, like with a different, like, with slightly different branding, but like it looks different, but it's the same. And then it takes us a really long time to learn things. And then also like we also don't, like, that's what people thought then.
Right. People really I mean? Like, genuinely believed the sun went around the earth, and that they had like the modern science to prove it.
Right. And they were like, we know better than our ancestors who thought that
this is what drives me nuts when people go, well, common sense says, of course, trans women are going to be better. And you're like, common sense has said a lot of things throughout history that we now know were fucking stupid. So maybe let's not just like jump to common sense. Anyway.
Yeah. And then reading some of those stories about how, like, again, like your Caster Semenya, Duty Chan, these are names that are like in our generation. These are women who are probably about our age, Kelly, like who have had like invasive sex testing involving every kind of like, if you can imagine the invasiveness, that's it, you know? And that's only 10 years ago. Like,
yeah, and like Caster Semenya is kind of, I think, what started this whole debate in track again. And Caster, I feel like Caster was not a trans athlete. Caster was born a woman, was maybe like a tomboy, right? And that becomes where like people are like, oh, well, she doesn't look womanly enough. And then that's where you get into this slippery slope that like Nikki mentioned that we're all concerned, where it starts to be like, oh, well, so-and-so doesn't look like a woman. So-and-so looks manly, which was always what bothered me about these trans policies we mentioned last week. Like CrossFit implemented one of the early shitty trans policies early, like back in January, that was like operating on a reporting each other, like that. You can report somebody that you suspect of being trans. And you're like, how is that going to work? Like, we're going to be like, she has too many muscles in CrossFit.
Yeah, in
like,
CrossFit.
That's not going to work.
Yeah.
So it just seems that is, to your point, like where it makes me really stressed or makes me really upset that there's a reason we got rid of this in the 90s.
Yes.
We have now not had sex testing at an international level, or mandated sex testing at an international level, for 30 years. Mm-hmm. There was not a wave of men winning women's titles. There was not a wave of trans athletes winning titles in that 30 years. Right. If this was a huge problem, it would have been a problem. It's not. It's a manufactured problem. Yeah. And then I was telling you, I knew that all these scientists back in the 90s and 80s had campaigned to get rid of this testing because for all the reasons we're talking about. And I was like, man, how are we back here again? If they got rid of, I was like, did they all die? Is that why they're not like, and then, one of them kind of wrote this thing and I was like, oh man, we're just ignoring them. They're going to have to wage a whole new campaign.
Well, the announcement just came out. I mean, I feel like you and I know what it's like to wage a whole new campaign. So I hope they're not as tired as we are right now, because
I have to imagine they're very tired.
The other thing, and we haven't even talked about, like, which is like what I hate that underscores all of this, is like the limiting beliefs about what women are capable of. That is like ultimately behind all of this, is that like she couldn't have performed so well if she was like somehow like a natural biological
she was a real woman. She wouldn't be that fast.
She must have some kind of like extra testosterone advantage, or which like we have limited evidence showing even that like extra natural testosterone.
No, all evidence does not. It is not a linear, like whoever has more testosterone is the fastest. Like that is not how it works. Like they can show this across, like that has been studied across many things. There's slight advantages in different sports, but it does not progress in a increasing way. Whoever has the most natural testosterone is the best. That is and
in men's sports, like when someone has like a biological advantage, we completely like celebrate their strengths. And like if we started testing men for testosterone, like no doubt it'd be like, oh well, we'd celebrate the guy with the highest testosterone and like his whatever, and like it's a completely different set of standards for women, which I just like I can't.
This is your like deep Sarah. So this is okay. I call these like Kelly thoughts, where you're like, what even are borders anyway? Right. This is your like deep Sarah. Like, why are we even living? My like deep, what is even the point anyway? Is that I think because again, so I have a 5-month-old, and I've listened, so I get a lot of people projecting like things about kids and gender and thoughts. Yep. People think way too much that like their personality is their personality, and that like it's not dictated by society and culture and where you grew up. And I said this to somebody was making something about, well, boys are just always like that. And I was like, well, if that was true biologically, it would be true in every country, and it's not.
Right.
And they were like, oh, people have way too much faith in their own personality and their own like ability to determine their destiny. And it's like, in reality, that's just like not how it works.
Well, and I studied, like, as you know, so much like psychology and sociology that I could never, like with babies, like the big one for me, I was probably in second year. I did like a sociology of the family course that was run by a very feminist professor, right? But like there was a study where like they showed how parents held babies, like in those you probably have one, those like kind of front pack things that you just put your baby in. I don't know.
Yeah, whatever. We have one of those. You just put them in like this.
You just stick them in. Yeah. So apparently, like people would like this goes back. Okay, so it might be different now, but like would naturally put like a female baby pointing in to them and a boy pointing out, and people were just like naturally making that choice, right? And you're like, oh, okay, like even this thing you're doing with like your freaking 1-month-old is like facing your boy out towards the world and facing your girl inward, like to that connection.
The weird thing for me, Sarah, is the 4-month-old swimsuits. Like, why are the girls in leotards? They're 4 months old. Like, what is this about? Like, it's very weird. So,
oh yeah, we could probably go on and on.
We could go on with that. But the point here was when we get into these things that are like, who is a woman, who isn't? Let's report this person for not being a woman. I think it just, what's the word? You're showing your own problems, right? Like you are demonstrating how much you believe that these things really deeply matter, right? That like, it's.
Yeah. And we haven't even like begin to discuss the racism part of this, or the like Western, like sort of clinical Western division of gender that we bring to this whole, like that a lot of people bring to this whole conversation.
Yeah, there's a whole level of like when you're like, oh, she doesn't look womanly like a woman, she doesn't look feminine enough. There's a lot of that gets projected onto minorities and projected onto like whatever you want to call it, like the global South, developing countries. And there's also a lot of evidence that intersex conditions are higher in some of those countries, which we think is because that when people are born in Western hospitals, interventions are taken.
Yes.
And that interventions are not taken on infants in a lot of developing countries. And so then they grow up and they're fine, and they were like, they're fine as people. Like it doesn't, but then someone comes along and it's like, oh, you're obviously different. And that's it's weird. And so like, so all these kinds of tests now that you're going to carry, like, and apparently when we did sex testing like before, you literally got a card that said like, I am a certified, like,
and they're bringing that back, aren't they?
I don't know if they're going to bring a card back, but that like makes me laugh.
I mean,
that we're going to have a card.
Yeah. Because if you're gonna race at the World Championship, you have to get this thing done.
You have to get this
thing.
You
have like at least a check beside your name.
There's going to be like a little database of women, verified women.
Like who's verified as a woman. Like,
you're like, oh man. So this is very, very annoying, very upsetting. Very clear that this shift is happening because there's like a political rightward shift happening in the world, not because the science has changed, because the scientists are still saying this is a terrible idea. This is not how sex works. We do not have a problem with men pretending to be women at the Olympic level. So
it's not even a problem. It's like they've solved a problem they don't have.
Yeah. And my saying is always, when you have solutions looking for problems, you create more problems than you solve. And I think that's going to be universally what we're doing here.
Here's what I'm going to say, because you and I have ranted for a long time about this. And like, I would love to know if anyone listening has like thoughts or opinions
about the sex testing,
about anything at all. Okay. Right. So if you want to send us a voice memo about it, you can send that to my email. We'll put it in the show notes. I'll get our editor to put it in the show notes, and you can email me and send me the voice memo, and we will listen to and respond to your voice memo, because I feel like I would love to have like more voices in this conversation. So
all right, well that was the big news last week. Big news kind of going into the track national championships, going into the world championships are in a month and a half now, which is one of the bigger kind of international competitions, because obviously track's a pretty big one up there. And they only do it every 2 years now. And I actually think there's a little bit of a lull now. By a little bit of a lull, I mean, I think there's a week here without any like massive sports. We do have the U.S. Gymnastics National Championships for this weekend, but Simone, Jordan, Suni, they're all taking like a break right now, so they won't be competing.
Okay, I'm sure it will still be. Gymnastics is like the coolest. Like honestly, gymnastics is one of those sports that I'm like, even as a runner myself, I'm like, why do we celebrate like the person who can go from like point A to point B the fastest, like so much more than we celebrate like these gymnasts who are literally doing like things that the average human cannot even fathom. Like I can't even do a 1% version of what Simone Biles does, but like I could probably run like within a certain percentage of like the 100 meters. You know
I will say, I think you should go. So I went to the U.S. National Figure Skating Championships one year, and that makes it very, very clear what you're saying, because then you see like the top 4 heats of the top 6 in each heat. And it's not even until you get to the last heat that you're like, oh, they look like the people. Like up till then, these are the 8th best ice skater in the country. And you're like, they don't look like that. And then in the top heat, there's really only like 2 people that like, you're like, oh, they look like they belong in the Olympics. And then the U.S. at the time was not even as good as like the world. And then you start to be like, oh, I could be like the 20th best figure skater in America. And I'm not even close to... I can't remember the Korean girl's name who won like 4 years in a row, but like, you know, like you're like, oh shit. And I can skate like across the rink.
Right.
So then you start to really get a sense of scale. If you go to one of these and you actually like watch all of them, you're like, oh.
Yeah. Well, as someone who's trying to learn a front handspring with all of the mats and all of the trampolines, and still has not been able to land on my feet on a single occasion, I can tell you that they are amazing. Okay, Kelly, who's your athlete of the week?
I am going to go with Emily Infeld. That was very exciting to see her win her national title. And it gives me hope, Sarah, because at 35, she won her first national. I just need to discover my sport, train for 10 years.
When the netball recruiters come for you, Kelly, you will be like, I knew you were coming. Yeah. I've watched netball once on TV, so we're good.
So I feel like that makes all of us who are still dreaming that somehow we're going to make the Olympics at 41 hope.
Right.
So
I kind of like that. Okay, I'm going to pick Miriam Von Rohr, who came, I think she was 7th overall in the games, but she won because the lift, there's always one event that's just a lift.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Okay. And the lift was a max 1 rep max back squat. And she back squatted 360 pounds.
Interesting.
And like talking about things that are mind blowing.
Yeah.
And she made it look easy. And afterwards, she kind of said, "Oh, she wasn't sure what her PR was, but she thinks it was about 360." I think she wasn't sure because she typically does her weightlifting in kilos.
Right.
Like, was it like but like 365? Maybe she thought she had done before. So like, she didn't even need to do that to win that event. And you know, as someone who like I've been working on my back squat for like, I don't know, 7 years.
Yeah. What are you up to?
And now I can back squat like 170 pounds.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say. I feel like I'm like around like 140. Yeah.
Right. Like when you're like, okay, like you can like double my back squat, and then you have to still add some, and then that's like it's like it's like a thing that it's not like a thing I don't do.
Right.
Like,
you understand it. Yeah.
Like when I was a triathlete, I maybe max back squatted like 120.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Like because we didn't like focus on that. I just like did that as strength training. Right. So now I'm like, man, I can't even. That was mine. And then she was so fun to watch. She was just boom, boom, easy 360.
Boom. So, all right, great. Those are our picks. If you send us a voicemail, let us know your pick too. There we go. We should also have some like other people's picks, because I tell you, every week I hear like crazy, interesting, random stories of athletes. There's also a woman here in California who just did a swim circumnavigation of Lake Tahoe. This is the first one, because it's like the biggest freshwater lake in the country. Cool. So there's always crazy things happening. Send us your picks too, and leave us a review. Share the pod with your friends, because we want to spread the women's sports movement. And next week we're going to talk to the woman bringing back the women's decathlon world championships. So that'll be interesting.
I'm excited for that one. I think she's putting, I mean, I remember that story from last year too, and putting a lot of effort into why can't women do the decathlon? Let's make that happen. So excited for that next week.